Good morning. It's Sunday morning here, and it's a lovely sunshiny day out. I'm awake just a little bit earlier, or up and at 'em, a bit earlier than I normally would be. It's 10 to 8 in the morning here in the UK. I'm not ready for breakfast. I'm awake, so I've got my morning cuppa, which is a very weak, fairly milky coffee this morning. And I thought I'd carry on with this particular drawing here and see what I can do with it. This struck me yesterday, and it sounds weird, but I draw every day, and not for work necessarily, not always for work, but nearly always I'll draw for pleasure regardless, just because I can. And this is one of those things. And I thought, well, if I'm drawing, it's no more effort for me to record it and me whittering on about things, really, because the only extra time really is in a quick dropping of front cards, end cards on the video, end cards, credit, title and credits or information or whatever. And time in uploading, and I can get on with other things while it's uploading to YouTube and being processed and checked and copyright checked and goodness knows what else that YouTube does, which is fine. So it may be that, most days I'll actually record my morning warm-up drawings and whatever I may be doing just for fun rather than for work, because I'm not comfortable showing things that perhaps I'm working on until it's almost like a go ahead, or I feel like I can give a sneak peek. So, but perhaps I will show some things as sneak peeks going forward. So carry on with this. I've got no idea what I'm doing here. It's a new day, and you look at things with fresh eyes and you think, oh yeah, that's where I'm going. I was working down here yesterday, and I'm going to carry on here. So it really is an absolutely lovely day here. And the lovely thing about me doing this early in the day is that by the time I'm awake and alert enough to drive or to be let out into the world safely by myself, it's not a good idea when I'm half asleep still. I can art, but being aware of things going on around me can be a bit, until I've really come around. So it's a nice way to spend that kind of waiting for me to become fully part of human again, as opposed to the sleeping one. There we go. I like these kinds of shapes as well. Teardroppy. Some call them a paisley shape, but they're not paisley. Meant to be leafy, almost. Not almost. Kind of leafy. And I do like to add these bits of black as contrast. Structure. Strengthening. Attachments. That sense that things are attached to each other, a bit like stained glass, the solder that's used on the leading between stained glass, where you get those little thicker bits. That's interest. And where areas look like they're not so separated, it helps to give that sense of that's one bit, that's another bit, where it makes sense. So I'm going to carry on these down to that corner, I think. Why? Because I can. This is one of these things where it's quite an intuitive, I work in quite an intuitive kind of way. And I can on things like this. It's where I don't need to plan anything out. I don't need to include anything in particular. I'm not working to a theme. All I'm doing is adding an interesting piece of art or drawing around this particular frame. Now then, I'm going to go up to this corner because I do want to do something that is similar to the bottom corner I've been working on. We're using the same kinds of motifs here. And I'm going to put these little, it's like there's an area folded over, and that I can bring out when I add colour. So while I was getting my coffee this morning, anybody who knows me, until I was really quite ill, not last December, the December before, I wasn't a fan of coffee, but I lost my sense of taste, possibly some sense of smell, for quite a while. And where I did taste things, they just didn't taste right. So it wasn't a loss of taste, it was a complete change in it. And I love tea, but tea just really did not taste right, and I lost all pleasure in drinking it. But the slight bitterness and different taste of coffee seemed to be something that was more pleasant to me, which was a huge surprise. And since then, I have continued to drink coffee in small amounts. As in small amounts is that I usually have a very big mug with a very small amount of coffee in, so that whatever liquid is in there, mostly water with some milk in, is slightly flavoured. It's enough that I enjoy the taste of coffee, but I don't get that full on hit of it, or bitterness, or whatever it is. And so, you know, I don't have coffee if I'm out and about because it's way too strong, and trying to explain to people that I'd rather like the steamed, can I have the steamed milk in one mug, or milk and steamed water in one mug or cup or whatever, and could I have the coffee separate? I don't want coffee in that, so I can have my own. And then I literally put a teaspoon of whatever coffee has gone through the machine excuse me, and put that into the mug, and I'm looked at as if I'm bonkers. But I like the taste of coffee, but I don't like it strong. So I tend to just drink it at home, really. And I don't have a coffee machine or a percolator because there's only me. So I prefer the convenience of instant coffee, and I've discovered one that I actually really like. It's very smooth, it's very mild, and it works. So it's something that's a variation. I'm trying not to drink too much because I've been drinking a lot more water for various reasons, and that means that my caffeine intake has gone down, because I would normally drink quite a lot of tea and coffee in a day, and I found I'm sleeping a lot better. Now, whether that's just coincidental and that just something else has happened to make me sleep better, I do not know. But as sure as eggs is eggs, I'm going to try to limit the amount of tea and coffee I drink. Oh, that can have one that side, because why not? Because, well, that worked out nicely. I've got that there, but not the trailing leafy bits. That's fine. They don't. It's unequal, so they don't have to be the same. This one needs. It's got a bit square around the bottom, so I don't want things too regular. So I've got that regularity in the centre. So while I'm waiting for myself to be ready for breakfast, because I'm not hungry at this precise moment, that's for sure, I'm having tea and doing my morning drawing. It's actually a really nice way to spend the first hour or two of a morning. Said it's kind of warming up, it gets my muscles working, and sometimes it gives me inspiration for other things. And because I know there are things I want to do, I choose projects that I can either complete in a fairly short amount of time or that I can keep adding to. And that's always interesting because I don't plan these kinds of things out. You know, the only pencil I've used on this was around the picture in the middle, so I knew where I wanted to put it and where I could add extra colours. And the pencil board around, which isn't even, it's just hand drawn as a rough guide because I know I'm not going to do straight lines around it. So that's about it really. I had an idea I wanted some more geometric patterns around the frame because that seems to work nicely for me, but it isn't essential necessarily. You know, there's lots of ways that I could have created those initial borders, but I do like geometric patterns. So yeah, I was wittering about, while I was getting my drink, I was thinking about this, because before I went downstairs to make coffee and wash up from yesterday and things like that, I thought, oh, how am I going to add colour to this? And I've actually decided on it, because I think this paper, I know, will take a little bit of water quite happily without too much effort, because it's such heavyweight cartridge paper. So I'm going to use some brush pens and a damp brush, some water and a damp brush to add some colour to this. And I'm going to keep the brown tones going and ready brown tones going in that, perhaps adding some golden tones in. I don't want to add too much colour because I don't want to overpower the centre, so that's going to be crucial, because the particular brush pens I've got are really rich in dye. I was going to say pigments, but they're not pigment pens. There is a difference between dye and pigments, if you're not aware. Dyes colour the liquid in the pen or paint or ink, and they're completely mixed with it. Not mixed, dissolved. It's kind of mixing, but they're dissolved in it. Pigment pens, the liquid part, pigment inks, the liquid part may be coloured, but there's bits of solid pigment floating in it. And some can be water activated again, but not all of them. So that's my understanding. I'm not an expert on the different kinds of inks. I may add some greens. I think some mossy greens would be quite nice on these leaves. I'm going for that vintagey feel here, I think. Let's see what happens when I get the pens out and think about the colours I'd like to use. I'm no expert on adding colour to things, as in, I have my own way, I think, and my own way suits me. I've worked out, I do tend to do this because I've worked it out. Oh, excuse me, my words this morning don't want to come easily. that I work best with quite limited colour palettes. Problem with me and something like digital art or any kind of art is if I'm given the whole box, I'll try and use every colour. And digital art means I've got almost an infinite number of colours and tones and shades and goodness knows what. And a bit like a child in a sweet shop, you know, oh my gosh, I'll have a bit of this, I'll have a bit of that, I'll have some of that, and I'll use this, I'll use that. And I end up with something that might look okay, but it doesn't feel okay to me. It feels like I've almost overwhelmed myself with colour. And it can be fun for the cute, you know, doodle worlds or things like that, which can be really bright, you know. As far as I'm concerned, me personally, that will take that kind of approach, you know, because you've got lots of different characters in there, you know, monsters, cute stylized animals, and you know, plants and so on, and all kinds of things, whatever goes in there. But for things like this, I heard somebody mention it, and I don't remember who, but there's an elegance in limits. And there certainly is with a limited palette. There's an elegance in it. It makes everything come together. A coherence, I suppose, like everything belongs. And although you can add splashes of colours to highlight and so on, which I tend not to do because I end up perhaps with, I'm thinking about monochrome palettes, but it's sticking within those limits, those colours. But even though I choose those colours, it's the shades and tones that I use, particularly if, you know, obviously, if I say particularly, obviously if it's monochrome, I'm going to add browns to this, then I'd stick to browns, and, you know, whatever browns I choose are likely to be shades of each other. Shades of one, not each other. Again, I'm apologising, I am wittering here. But went there, it doesn't matter. But there's also, when you limit yourself to colours, or here I suppose I'm unconsciously limiting myself to motifs, because I've used, you know, a couple in the border, I've used one flower, I've used two different kinds of leaves, and then I've got this frothy stuff that looks a bit chrysanthemum-y. But when there's limits, it forces you to be a bit more creative in the way that you do things. And I think for me personally, I enjoy those elegance of limits. I enjoy the creativity that it brings. But I also enjoy that once I've chosen that limited palette, once I've decided on 3, 4, or even one colour that I'm going to use, or 2 sometimes, basic colours, it takes away that, oh, what colour shall I use next, almost, because my choices are limited. And it focuses me on playing with that contrast of light and dark, shadow and highlight, and really playing with volume or dimensionality of whatever I'm adding colour to. So that works for me. Taken me a long time to get there. And whenever I'm doing the sample coloured templates, excuse me, I'm going to have a drink. And again, I apologise about my creaky table. Whenever I'm doing the coloured templates for the colouring books, I do Creative Haven or the Colour Me Calm ones I've done, or, you know, any others, even self-published one I've done, which was Doodle Worlds, but I will be doing some more, I'm sure. Mine's ticking over the next one. Is that because I get to do self-publish, I get to do things that my publishers may be not interested in, and get to do types of drawings that people seem to really enjoy. You know, the feedback I get from my fan page, fan group. It's not mine, it's run by other people. I am an admin. Set up by others, and I was invited to join in because they asked my permission to do it, as if you need permission for a fan page. Bless. And I mean that in a not sarcastic way. I was really taken aback by it. And it was lovely because I wouldn't have done it myself. Because I'm a typical Brit. I'm not of the culture of self-promotion and that we see on social media so much, all the almost look at me, look at me, look at me, and going for clicks and likes, as nice as they are to have, because you know you're doing something that is perhaps appealing and can inform my choices on work I do for more commercial aspects of work. It's not something I necessarily need unless I'm doing something different. I share my work because I can, because I hope it gives people pleasure in looking at it, perhaps brings a smile to somebody's face or lifts their spirits, even if it's just for a moment in the day. If that happens, then as far as I'm concerned, my art's done its job, because you know, there's no big message in my art. I'm not making political commentary or societal commentary, or I was going to say any personal message, anything about me, but it does say something about me. Artists leave more of themselves in their art than perhaps they may think, unless they're doing copies of somebody else's. But even then, there are traces of that person in the way your muscles move, and you create strokes with whatever tools you're using. The evidence is there, even if it's subtle, but even down to choices of colour, ways of working. So I quite like to share my journey, because it helps to give people perhaps a bit of perspective, one insight into the processes and a bit more about things. And so what was I wittering about before this? I've lost my train of thought. God, this happens all the time. It really does. Oh yeah, I share my work. These personal bits and pieces that I do, which I do just for fun and interest. That'll be okay, because I'll disguise that bit where I've gone over the line, because we can do that. Absolutely we can. Forever going back and checking that I've done certain things when I realise, oh, I've done that there. Did I do that on the others? So, but the feedback is always nice when I'm doing something new and a bit different. And I think that's how I use it, is to gauge whether it makes sense to other people, I suppose, or it's something that other people like to see, because I like it, generally. I have disasters, which is less likely with colour. Now I found out what I particularly like in terms of those limited colour palettes, but also as I work digitally, because I go, oh, what was I thinking there, because I can easily change things without having to redo a piece of artwork, and that's frustrating. But for this, I know I've got a good idea what will work here, so that will be fine and hunky-dory and lovely. Go. Okay, how's that looking? We'll go, oh, that looks a bit square up there. Well, yeah, it's gonna, because I need to do something here. What am I going to do? I'm going to have these crawling along the edge. Crawling? They're not crawling, they're growing. Yeah, crawling. Pen works, art works, mouth doesn't. This time in the morning, I guess. So limited colour palettes. Elegance of limits. And the creativity that brings as well. I'm gradually doing a course on Domestica. I've got quite a few there to do. So I discovered this. I knew about Domestica before the pandemic, but being stuck at home and not being able to go out and about much during the various lockdowns, I've been looking for things that will extend me and help me to develop artistically in ways that perhaps I wouldn't have done ordinarily. And even though whatever I try may not be for me in the way that the course is set up, it gives me insights into things that I do enjoy, that I could use. The typographic portraits one that I did was really, really good. It's just that me and portraits, I can see how I could do it, but I went round and round the circles with the one I was working on, and I will go back to this at some point. What I found interesting was I adapted it to adding depth of shadow and highlight, for want of a better way of saying it, to stylized drawings. So I chose an ammonite or part of an ammonite, and used lettering to add the shadow and the highlights, and also the actual patterning along those sections, like little ridges and dips and so on. And that was an interesting thing. It was in monochrome. So, but I wasn't ready at that point to take it anywhere. It sometimes takes quite a long time to rattle around my head unconsciously until one day I'll just go, right, I know what I want to do. This is how I'm going to do this. And it's like the pennies all come together at the right time. Laying foundations. Another one I did was about modern watercolouring. I love how people work with watercolour. I really do. I admire anybody who can get watercolour to do the things they do, or, you know, I just do not get watercolour. I can play with it. I can make it intense colours or not. Different kinds of papers. I know what paper, I experimented with different types of watercolour paper. And cotton is definitely the best. Expensive, but, a luxury. In fact, as I'm thinking about that, I just realised something I need to add to a list. So just make a note of that. Okay, just made a note of something there. So as I talk, sometimes I realise things. And so it's fun to play with, it's fun to see what it does. It's fascinating to see colour or water or ink or other media interact with the watercolour. It really is. But at the same time, what do I do with this? And I think I could happily do it just for pleasure, and it's just something that I've realised now. And I've just written that, made a note of it. To play with watercolours just for pleasure. And I have got some really nice paper here. And for that, I'll be happy to spend money on high cotton content paper, just for the sheer pleasure of seeing colours mix and spread and bloom. You never know, if I use large enough pieces of paper, perhaps I'll get ones that are pretty enough to use as backgrounds in art or to draw on, because that's quite fun. That is quite fun, actually, is to do something with watercolour and just let the colours bloom and then come in with a pen and add line and pattern to it to bring out or to make use of those spontaneous patterns or colours that appear in the watercolour. And that is a lot of fun to do. So there's that. One of the current course I'm working on is called Character Factory. And it's really interesting because I find it incredibly difficult to draw people. I enjoy life drawing. I've done life drawing in the past. And after you get over the first embarrassment of having a naked person in front of you that you have to draw, it's interesting because it's sort of like, oh my God. And then as soon as the pen starts, they're a person, but they're also not, because the artistic part of my brain starts looking for the pattern and almost architecture of the human body. And when the light is right and you can see shadows and highlights, there's an amazing number of almost arches like you'd find in Gothic, or more Gothic-y, because a lot of them have got pointy tops rather than rounded arches, but that architecture is there. And so my mind works in a different way. And it's lovely to do. And I found that working with, going back is how things are just slotting together. Is that, yeah, I'd take pencil onto paper and draw with pencil and create shadow and leave highlights. But my favourite way of working is with coloured paper, and then a white pencil and perhaps a darker tone or two darker tones of the paper. So I was literally painting with light and shadow, or drawing with light and shadow. And there we are, connections made as I talk. And I discovered that that was how I really like to draw the human form. Except for heads, feet, and hands, I struggled. Faces. It's both a struggle, and it's also something that, surprisingly, as an artist, portraiture doesn't really interest me as such. It's, yeah, people's faces are are interesting, are varied and wide, their expressions are, but it's not something as an artist that really engages me. But this character factory, when it comes to adding take, for example, my Doodle Worlds things where I've got very cute, very stylized animals and monsters and even people-ish kinds of things, that appeals in a way, although I much prefer drawing aliens and monsters, I suppose, and robots than adding people to it. But the Character Factory is interesting because it's about, although the first lot is about drawing human forms and so on, it extends to lots of other things, or at least I'm hoping it will. And the methods I use will certainly allow me to extend it to creation of other things, perhaps. But it's getting out of that, when I'm drawing people, I think it's got to look like this. And there's techniques being given there that help you break out of this mould. And there was a quote from Patricio which resonated with me, and it was something along the lines of, it's not about things being realistic, it's giving a visual, it's just giving a representation of it, a suggestion that this is what it is. Things don't have to look real in this kind of style, and that's what I do in all my art. They look real, but they're not. Again, more coffee. It's going to take me forever to drink that big mug, but that's fine. Insulated mugs are great. I can draw things, detailed drawings, realistic, lifelike, drawings of things. But I guess this kind of drawing is one of those ones of elegance of limits again, where it's not just an elegance of limits in terms of the number of motifs I'm using, number of colours, things like that. It's an elegance in the amount of detail, the limiting detail in the motifs, and leaving that simplicity, that stylised form speak for itself. I think that's why I love Art Nouveau, Art Deco so much, and a fair amount of the arts and crafts as well, because it was about, this is my perspective, it's about taking the essence of things, the beautiful shapes and forms, and letting those stand for themselves rather than creating a photographic representation, I suppose, of art, like a lot of art had done before that. You think about all the old masters, like, off the top of my head, like Mona Lisa, and all of the portraits going back centuries, I was going to say decades, centuries, which are very realistic. Artists are really the photographers of the day. And photography, where you can get such realistic images of people, I admire anybody who can paint a fantastic portrait. Don't get me wrong. There's a beauty in what people do, and one that is both realistic and expressive of the emotions and that the artist wants to create or has picked up upon, or about the personalities and things. I admire people who can do that, because emotion in art is something I would struggle with, because I still struggle with understanding what my emotions are. That's a long story. But it's doesn't mean I don't have emotions. I recognise a lot of them, but there are some I never realised I had. But photography can have a very personal response, and there are fantastic photographers out there. I love people who can take fantastic photographs. I'm not one of them, I don't think. Perhaps if I had lessons, I might learn more about how to work like somebody. But my idea of photography really is, I take a photograph as a record for perhaps some future work. Maybe. But often they sit on my computer and don't do very much. Or they're just a record of a day out. Not that we've had much chance to go out and about over the past year. no doubt I could have taken photographs of my day, but that doesn't appeal to me either. But we have all of these lovely, again, it's that elegance of limits, I suppose, and that the limits that are imposed on creating simple motifs based on perhaps real things or these shapes that come forward. And there is something absolutely lovely about that. And it's appealed to me, and it has, I think, since fairly early on in me developing my art, my early 40s, start of my artistic journey, late 30s, early 40s, I think it was. But even thinking back as a child, I enjoyed sort of like drawing things for scientific reports, as it were. So if we went on a field trip when I was in university, the environmental pollution science part of my degree, we'd often have to collect, say, flowers and things and bring them back and identify them, and we'd have to draw them, or thin sections of rocks under microscopes, observational drawings. There we are, that's the word I was looking for, observational drawings of things like fossils, rocks, flowers, other things. I really enjoyed doing that because they were observational. They were meant to focus on features. They didn't have to be necessarily lifelike, but they had to be good enough that somebody could say, yeah, that's what it is. This is what we all see. This is what you've seen, and you identified it correctly. And I enjoyed that. Enjoyed looking at things in detail, taking the time to draw the basic essence of it, the features that would allow identification. And of course then there was the labelling, and I've always loved taking my time with handwriting, although as I'm getting older now, my handwriting's becoming really scuzzy. But I think it's just a lack of practice, really, because I don't have the opportunity or the reason to write all that often. I try to journal every day, but some days I just miss because at the end of the day I may just be too tired and unfocused. Perhaps I ought to write about the day before in the morning. I don't know. What do I remember about the day? Journaling is an interesting process. So I've always drawn like this, I suppose. But like many things, I don't want this to sound big-headed, but when it comes easily, when it's something I've done and I think, oh, that's really easy, it's too simple, anybody can do this, then I don't see how it's a valuable skill or gift, talent, well, it's a skill. It's like anything. Practice. So, this kind of art comes really easy to me. And finding sources of inspiration has always been, fascinating for me. And often it is the patterns that I find in those sources of inspiration that form a part of my art. It's patterns or the basic shapes, I suppose, are there. To wobble my mouse because my screensaver came on. So I just hope that my voice is continuing to record. If not, we'll get a sped up version of this after a certain point. So the shapes the basic shapes, and how much you can do with those shapes, how much you can change them or add some simple detail to them to make them into something else. Endlessly fascinating. And about the same time that I started art, I'd also discovered my love of Romanesque and Gothic architecture and other things. I've mentioned this before, is there's a huge amount of inspiration in the patterns on arches, corbels, mouldings, window shapes, and all kinds of things in old ecclesiastical churches and abbeys and priories and so on, and also in the art that remains. And those started to become, buildings are interesting, but I discovered that when I visit a building, if I'm going to sit and draw, I'm not going to draw the building. There will be elements of it that really interest me, and I'll draw those. And I think the first time I did something was when I visited Tewkesbury Abbey, because Tewkesbury Abbey was absolutely beautiful. And there was this gorgeous door around one of the sides. I couldn't tell you if it's the north, south, east or west side of the church. And I sat on a wall opposite it with my sketchbook. And I drew the bits of this door that really interested me. Just those pieces, bits and pieces. And I connected them together with imaginary lines, as it was termed, I think. But they weren't, they were lines that helped me make sense. But as I visited the church, as I walked around it, there were lots of things that caught my attention. So I'd add this to that one picture. And it was funny how they all slotted into place. It was like a jigsaw, that these sections that were irregularly shaped just fit together and made a pleasing composition. And I tend to do that now. If I visit places and I have my sketchbooks, or sketchbook and pen, or a notebook and pen, is I tend to take that page and fill it with all of these things that interest me, but slot them together. And sometimes I might need to use lines or whatever to fill spaces in, or lines from these will naturally grow out and form spirals or curves or patterns of their own. And it's kind of like this, except I'm recording my experience of visiting a place. And I'm trusting that once I've had my second vaccination, my car will be serviced and anything that needs to be done, so I'm sure that it's roadworthy and safe, because I'm really funny about my cars. I've had so many problems with cars in the past, even though they've been looked after, that I like to be sure that, I don't want to know, you've got about 500 miles on the brakes before they need changing. Brake discs, change them, because I do that mileage in, before lockdown, I'd be doing that well over 1,000 miles a month. So just do it. I'll only be back here in a fortnight, so just do it. The same with tyres and things. You've got about 5 minutes, just do it. Give me tyres that will last me a couple of years. And I'll be able to get out and about. And once the world perhaps becomes a bit quieter, when people have got over the freedom of lockdown, as long as we don't go back into another one. But there'll be all these lovely places to visit again. They haven't gone anywhere. been there for thousands of years, so they'll be there for me when it's safe and when I feel safe. So this isn't dissimilar to that kind of idea of fitting things together. And that's often what it is when I draw, coming to think about it. It is an almost fitting of things together in a pleasing way. It's sort of like, I don't know what's going to go together, but I'm going to fill this, I'm going to pop things in this particular space and make something interesting of it, or of these. You can see that I'm not adding any other motifs here at all. I'm just working with these couple. I think it's because I've been talking about elegance of limits, because sometimes I think, oh, I'll add some of those in. But I'm not going to, because I don't need to. I was sort of thinking about leaving some empty space here, but I think I'm going to end up filling in the whole of this frame, which is fine. It's fine. It's what we need to do. And this really does now need some, it's got quite dense with these areas of these arches and black centres, so there needs to be some contrast, I think, happening, and some of these shapes. Does Entangled speak? It's Muka, I believe, or Mukarish, or whatever. I just like the shape. Anything that's very organic tends to appeal to me. Because I've made the decision to put these like flaps or folds over, then I'm just doing them as I go along now, rather than going back and doing them afterwards. Because I could leave them off, but that would mean that things perhaps become a little bit more complex than I want them to. So of course I've got quite a lot of these sketchbooks still. Well, I say quite a lot of them. I've got all my art in the house. And so if you're interested in seeing any of this, you're going back the best part of 20 years most probably, the start of this journey, then leave comments, and perhaps I'll do a video where we have a look back in time, and I have a look back in time and things I used to do, and select some stuff as well, and see where it takes me. Yes. Might even get inspiration. It'll remind me of how much I like Ernst Haeckel, and back in the 19th century, I think he was working, early 20th perhaps, microscopically looking at plankton and macroscopic life as well as macroscopic, and drawing them with immense beauty and detail and symmetry, particularly symmetry. And they are very beautiful drawings. And I guess that also influenced a lot, and it's that kind of detail that I love as well, and I will happily use sometimes. Don't forget, you know, I might be using very stylized shapes here, but everything is, you can break everything down into a series of shapes, into basic shapes to draw, and then adjust them as needs be. And I think that's how I tend to analyse things when I'm drawing them. That's going to have one going that way, just for a bit of variety, I think. It's that analysis of shapes and what shapes we've got here. I think most artists do. It's just that I don't stop and think about it very consciously. It's something that you do unconsciously. more than anything. And it's if I have to talk through what I'm doing, I become aware of that process. Otherwise, it just happens. So I am going to, this video will be a bit longer than an hour, I think, but that's fine, because I am going to finish this section up, and then this will be done. I'll be ready for breakfast, and this then will have time to dry before I add colour, and I will record that process, or at least some of it, because that's going to be a long drawn out process, because I don't do colouring quickly. It takes me a lot longer to add colour than it does to draw something, which is logical if you think I'm going to be adding colour to every little space, whereas I'm just drawing around a smaller amount of the space available. I don't know if that made any sense at all, but I know what I'm trying to say. Welcome to my weird world. The way my brain and my mouth don't work together necessarily all the time, or at all often. And these are handy to fill in larger areas as well, because something to be interesting, there has to be that variation in how dense a motif is, or how dense a pattern is. I'm not going to add any more of these flowers, they're lovely just where they are. Nice little high spots or highlights there. So how am I going to do this now? Yeah, let's have one going that way. The lovely thing about these is I can fit them in up to this. That works nicely. Just that. Oh, little head, thick stem. Does it matter? No, because this is how things are in nature. Perhaps that's a baby one. It's got a lot of growing yet to do. That works. That will work as well. As will that. It's black there. It's a bit scuzzy. There we are. Just try and adjust that line a bit. Not a lot I can do about that one, but in the grand scheme of things it will get lost in it all, I'm sure. Ooh, I don't know if the microphone picked my stomach up. My stomach is telling me it is time for breakfast, but I, being me, am determined to finish this pen work before I breakfast today, because oh, sorry for turning that around so much. I couldn't work out how I wanted to get these ones in here, because then I can enjoy my breakfast without worrying about anything else. And I've got some things on today that I need to, meetings on Zoom and stuff, so I need to sort myself out for that. And I really do want to get out today for a walk. I didn't manage it yesterday because meetings and rain and just me not being in the right frame of mind, right mood, frame of mind, whatever. Today it probably will be, I think. Look, quite nice there. I am going to carry this on. And perhaps once I've had my walk and I'm relaxing this afternoon, I'll start adding some colour to this and do the next part of the video. I just need to give it a couple of hours to make sure these pens are particularly dry on top of the distress ink I use to colour the background. It's just a precaution, just in case, because I really don't want to shift this black pigment around in the ink. I like grunge, but grungy, vintagey colours, but I don't necessarily want black streaky grunge. That would not be all that pretty. It would not suit my aesthetics. This, but we'll see. Getting there. I think we're mostly done. There's just this tiny section here for me to decide what I want to do. Cheeky one there, behind the others. The lovely thing about this is, because as well, these patterns here are organic, and just like in nature, they grow all kinds of directions. These ones are anyway, and so it's just wherever my pen takes me with them. And I work with that. I think I've mentioned it before, but I'm not entirely sure. Their shapes I like because I enjoy the way they feel to draw. I don't know if that makes any sense, but the way my pen moves, and there's a pleasure in that. Which is why certain motifs I think appear so often in my work as well, because it's a happy pen that creates them, or happy hands, the hand-eye coordination. There's just something pleasing about that kind of movement. I guess it's a bit like dancing. If you love to dance in a particular way, there's a pleasure in it. And or a certain kind of movement or anything else. So there's that. There we are. That's done. I might tweak it as I add colour and think, oh, I'll need to add a bit more black there, but I don't think so. That does need that bit there. I just need to find a little bit of space so I can put my initials. And I think here will be just perfect for it. And that's it. Actually, it's only just over an hour. So the next step will be adding colour. Just centre that on my thing so I can have a nice picture of it. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening to me witter. I hope it's been an interesting insight into my mind, even though I often don't know what I'm going to talk about. It always surprises me I can find things to talk about like this when I'm not having any real interaction with people. But say thank you so much for joining me. Any products I've mentioned, I'm not paid for them. I'm not paid to promote them. I'm not giving free samples. They can work for anybody, all paid for with my own money. And any opinions, or I'm not recommending that you have to use these. It's what I like. And whatever you do with the rest of your Sunday or the day, whatever day you're watching this, enjoy it. Enjoy being creative. And why not give something like this a go? It's taken a small photo and made it something possibly quite precious, really. As I'm looking at the screen, you'd think that the photo wouldn't stand out, but perhaps it does more, because what Now the whole of it behind it is filled with pattern. It's just become the background. And even when I add colour, it'll just be the background. But that central image will still stand out thanks to the frames around it. And fingers crossed, it'll look absolutely spiffing once I've finished. The only thing I need to decide now is, am I going to scan this in digitally as well? It's possible I could do that and add colour digitally. The only issue is I put this on foam, but we'll see. So thank you very much for joining me this morning while I come round ready for breakfast. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Take care now. Bye.